For centuries, the Galactic Council had stood as the highest symbol of order among the stars. Inside its grand hall, beneath a domed ceiling of living crystal, representatives from hundreds of species gathered to decide matters that shaped the course of entire systems. Their languages were diverse, their forms even more so. Some floated, some shimmered. Others stood still, like statues of stone, and among their many seats, one had remained untouched for years. It sat at the far curve of the council ring, metal, unpolished and nameplate unclaimed, species 923, a name given long ago to a world on the edge of a spiral arm, too young, too noisy, and too wild to matter. That world was Earth. Most members didn't take it seriously. The more ancient civilizations referred to humanity with amused smiles or quiet warnings. They had watched humans rise fast, burning with ambition, chaos, and innovation, but always assumed they would either destroy themselves or learn to kneel. So the seat was left empty, more out of tradition than expectation. But then something unexpected happened. One morning, without warning or fanfare, the great doors of the council chamber hissed open mid-session. Conversations fell quiet, motions stilled. No one had requested new entries. No one had authorized planetary introductions. And yet, through those towering doors walked a single human woman, dressed in a sharp black diplomatic uniform. Her eyes, steady and calm, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who did not come to beg. Behind her came others stall, short, dark-skinned, light-skinned, each with different features, each holding data tablets or wearing badges that gleamed with the insignia of Earth's United Command. There was no announcement, no formal welcome. Yet the humans walked past stunned guards and awestruck diplomats like they belonged. They did not ask permission. They moved directly to the empty seat, and without hesitation, the lead woman ambassador Lyra Voss sat down. Her colleagues arranged themselves beside her, and then they waited. The chamber, usually filled with the hum of discussion or the low music of diplomatic tones, went silent. It was not the silence of confusion, it was the silence of realization, the silence of fear. For years, Council species had monitored Earth's transmissions, quietly observed their colony ships and early jump technology. They had seen humans rise from a single blue planet to establish outposts on nearby moons, then on other worlds, then on exoplanets that even the Council had once ignored. But no one expected them to arrive like this without announcement, without escort, without hesitation. One representative, an elder from the crystalline Zenari order, finally found his voice. "Humanity," he said, his voice like wind over glass. "You were not summoned. You have not been invited to speak, Lyra." Voss looked directly at him and responded calmly, "We didn't come to speak. We came to listen. But we will not wait for permission to do so." That single sentence shifted the energy of the entire chamber. The words were not loud, yet they echoed, bouncing off the memory of every species who had once assumed Earth would be passive or polite. Other council members exchanged glances, whispering through private channels, asking who had granted passage, who had opened security, who had verified their credentials. The truth was, no one had. Earth had bypassed the process entirely. Their ships had entered the core system without resistance, using codes no one knew they had. Their names were already embedded in the chamber's registry. Their data streams synced flawlessly with the Council's interface. Somehow they were prepared for everything. And still, they made no demands. They brought no threats. Instead, they sat quietly, watching, observing, as if they had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Across the galaxy, the news spread in ripples. On mining colonies, transport hubs, and distant embassies, the story grew. Humanity had arrived. Not through war, not through diplomacy, but by simply showing up calm, precise, and uninvited. For some, this sparked excitement. For others, deep concern. The species who had ignored Earth now reviewed their old reports again. Those who had studied humans closely whispered, "We should have seen this coming." One veteran diplomat from the HFY Confederacy summed it up best. "They didn't break in, they walked in. And now that they're here, the room feels different." Back in the chamber, Ambassador Voss leaned slightly forward, as the next topic was raised an old debate over border control near a volatile star cluster. She made no comment. She didn't need to. Her presence alone changed the tone of the conversation. And though the council continued its meeting, none of its members could shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Humanity had not asked for permission to sit at the table. They had simply arrived. And the galaxy, used to long rules and slow progress, had no idea what would happen next. The council expected formality, respect, perhaps even submission. But what humanity delivered was something entirely different. As the chamber filled with quiet anticipation, Ambassador Lyra Voss stood again, not to greet, but to present. With a calm tone and without preamble, she activated a series of data panels suspended in the air above her delegation. What followed sent murmurs through every corner of the vast hall. The first reports were about logistics' simple inconsistencies. In council supply chains, transport delays, resource misallocations across neutral territories. But then, more serious matters emerged. Records of missing freighters in disputed sectors, encoded messages intercepted near war-torn outposts, and entire settlements erased from planetary maps. Earth had not come with praise or questions about their invitation. They had come with Evans Hard, verifiable data showing that something was deeply wrong within the Galactic Council's operations. As screen after screen revealed timelines, coordinates, and visual records, a sense of growing unease spread through the room. Some council members exchanged nervous glances. Others activated private communication channels to confirm what they were seeing. No one, not even the oldest intelligence branches, had detected many of these patterns. And yet somehow Earth had collected it all. One representative from the Serenth Coalition, species known for its vast communication networks, broke protocol to ask the question pressing on everyone's mind. How do you possess this level of intelligence? Ambassador Voss turned to him, and her voice remained steady. Because we've been watching, she replied, silently, carefully, not just listening to broadcasts, but studying behaviors, traffic logs, and patterns that repeat when systems are meant to hide something. The chamber fell even quieter. This was not the speech of a newcomer seeking alliance. This was a warning, quiet but undeniable. The humans had not only uncovered the cracks in the council's structure, they had understood them. Some members were deeply unsettled. A senior delegate from the ancient Viscari Empire stood and demanded that Earth's access to the chamber be revoked immediately, accusing them of espionage and destabilization. His voice echoed with authority, but there was hesitation in the crowd. Done. Others, especially from lesser represented civilizations, remained silent, watching, processing. For too long, their voices had gone unheard. Now, humanity spoke not just for itself, but perhaps for them as well. One of the most surprising responses came from the Naren envoy, a soft-spoken aquatic species known for neutrality. She floated forward slowly and asked, "And what do you seek in bringing this forward, Ambassador? What outcome do you desire?" Voss replied without emotion, only awareness. "We were told this council stood for order and peace. We want to know if that is still true." That sentence carried weight far beyond its length. It wasn't an accusation, it was a challenge. The human delegation made no threats, proposed no changes, offered no deals. They simply laid out the facts and asked the council to reflect. It was a tactic few expected, and even fewer could counter. In private corners of the chamber, discussions began to stir quiet and cautious. Some called the humans bold, others dangerous. But even the most skeptical minds were forced to admit that the data could not be ignored. Every report had been triple verified, cross-checked with open-source council archives, and presented with full transparency. It was not the work of a species guessing their way through the stars. It was the work of professionals. Behind closed doors, security agencies scrambled to understand how Earth had achieved this level of access. Had they infiltrated council systems? Were they intercepting diplomatic signals? The truth, quietly uncovered by a few investigators, was more unsettling. The humans hadn't hacked anything. They had simply observed through patterns in trade, satellite paths, and even public broadcast things, most civilizations considered background noise, and they had turned that noise into knowledge. What truly unsettled the Elder Powers, however, was not just the data. It was the calm way humanity presented it. There was no arrogance, no boasting, no emotion. Just facts, cold, complete, and impossible to dismiss. In that moment, even those who feared humans had to admit something they had underestimated. Earth, greatly. Humanity had done what no species had ever dared to do on their first council appearance. They held a mirror to the chamber itself. And in that mirror, the council saw cracks, secrets, and complacency. Earth had changed the narrative, not through threats or war, but by speaking with clarity and purpose. And though many wished to push them away, even more began to listen. As the session adjourned, no decisions were made, but no one left the hall unchanged. The youngest species had entered with no formal welcome, and yet now every conversation behind closed doors included one name spoken with caution and curiosity: humanity. In the days that followed, private envoys from smaller systems began requesting quiet meetings with Earth's delegation. The quiet shift had begun, and the Council felt it. The balance of power, once held by ancient empires and wealthy alliances, had tilted slightly, silently, but definitively. Humanity had not come to be part of the game. It had come to change it. And the galaxy had only just started to understand what that meant. While Earth's ambassadors sat calmly in the council chambers and spoke in formal, measured tones, their true mission was already moving far beyond diplomacy. Hidden from the eyes of the larger galactic powers, humanity had launched an invisible campaign, one based not on speeches or signatures, but on actions carried out in the deep shadows of space. For months before their official arrival, Earth had been listening. Not just to the Council's public broadcasts, but to the whispers of distress from outer colonies, dying signals from isolated research stations, and encrypted cries for help from species that no one else bothered to hear. These were civilizations too small, too weak, or too poor to defend themselves, those caught in the invisible net of exploitation woven by some of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful members. Earth, still new to galactic politics, had no official authority to intervene. But they did not wait for permission. Quietly, without fanfare, they sent out their own agent specialist teams hidden within unmarked vessels, equipped with stealth technology and guided by a central purpose: uncover the truth, rescue the forgotten, and gather undeniable proof of what was being hidden behind the polished speeches of the Council. These operations came to be known only by rumor. In the far reaches of the Terrala sector, a secret research lab went dark overnight. Its experiments halted, its prisoners freed. In the Olic Rift, a slaver ship vanished without trace, later found drifting, its crew restrained, its cargo released. In Zone 7, a surveillance hub controlling illegal data collection was completely disassembled. Its memory cores wiped. Its backups rerouted to an anonymous signal tagged with Earth's encryption, one meant for Council archives. No one knew where the attacks were coming from. There were no battle reports, no survivors speaking of fleets or invasions. Only aftermath, precise, surgical, and deliberate. The media called it rebellion. Council security forces labeled it sabotage. The more paranoid empires believed a new faction was rising, some rogue coalition seeking to destabilize galactic order. But the truth was more focused, more human. Earth had committed to a quiet war, not of destruction, but of protection. They weren't building empires or conquering planets. They were removing shadows. Every mission was executed with care, minimizing harm, prioritizing life, and collecting data. Dozens of rescued species, once silenced or believed lost, were brought to safe locations and given a voice again. They told stories of forced relocation, cultural erasure, experimental violations, crimes committed not by pirates or rebels, but by powerful council-aligned factions acting with assumed immunity. Humanity listened to every story and recorded every detail. And while their ambassadors made no public accusations yet, their silence was not weakness. It was strategy. Earth knew the Council wasn't ready to face itself. So humanity built a case piece by piece, word by word, file by file. They let the truth become undeniable before revealing it. Still, not everyone remained unaware. A few sharp minds within the council began to notice a pattern. A security chief from the Ritari Combine tracked multiple unexplained disruptions and found traces of human encryption buried deep in overwritten code. A merchant guild from the Vihar system reported that someone was seizing illegal cargo routes, known only to their inner circle. And in private, some leaders began to whisper, could it be them? Could Earth be behind it all? But fear kept them silent. Because if it truly was humanity, then they were not just intelligent, they were patient, organized, and unwilling to accept the galaxy's broken systems. That realization unsettled those who had long sat comfortably at the top, yet not all feared them. In the refugee sectors, among the scattered survivors and silent voices, Earth's agents were becoming legends. Not saviors with banners and speeches, but quiet hands that appeared in the dark, removed chains, and vanished again. Many never saw their faces. Some only heard a single phrase whispered through a cum before extraction. You're not forgotten. The message spread. Hope grew. The galaxy had always assumed that change came slowly, through careful diplomacy and cautious evolution. But Earth brought a different kind of change, one that moved quietly, struck with purpose, and left behind nothing but justice. Still, humanity said nothing. They allowed the council to wonder, to guess, to question, but they never confirmed, they never denied. Because their war was not for fame or fear, it was for truth. And in the silence that followed each mission, their message became louder than any speech. We see what you've hidden, we hear what others ignore, and we will not look away. This was the hidden war fought without applause, waged without recognition. A war that no one declared but humanity had already begun. And though many still dismissed Earth as a young species trying to find its place, a few began to understand a far deeper truth. Humanity was not trying to join the council. They were already reshaping it from the shadows. The Galactic Council had never seen a day like this. The chambers, usually filled with the controlled rhythm of debates and well-rehearsed diplomacy, were packed with representatives from every corner of the known galaxy. The announcement of a special session called by Earth had spread faster than any message in recent history. Many believed humanity would use this opportunity to demand recognition, or perhaps to respond to the growing suspicions about their silent operations. But when the human delegation entered, they brought no armed guards, no banners of conquest, and no threats. Instead, they carried a sealed black case and a quiet confidence that unsettled even the most ancient species present. Ambassador Lyra Voss stood once again before the council ring, her voice calm as ever. She spoke only briefly, stating that Earth had collected significant information on activities within council space, information that needed to be seen, not debated. With a gesture, she activated a holoscreen that emerged from the center platform, its light washing over the entire chamber. What followed was not opinion, theory, or assumption. It was undeniable truth. Visual recordings showed hidden facilities on unregistered moons where members of lesser-known species were kept in containment chambers, experimented on without consent. Testimonies followed survivors rescued from those places, their voices, trembling but clear, recounting stories of families taken, cultures erased, homes turned to dust. One sequence showed a fleet from a powerful council member's faction conducting a cleanse operation on a neutral colony, with a timestamp that matched a period when the same faction had claimed to be engaged in peacekeeping. The entire hall fell silent. No one interrupted. No one moved. The evidence continued, revealing documents, intercepted messages, internal memos, all verified, time-stamped, and layered with sensor data. What made the revelation even more shocking was the fact that the Council's own systems had failed too. Detector perhaps intentionally overlooked these atrocities. And yet Earth, a species that had only recently discovered faster than light travel, had managed to uncover it all. Representatives from long-respected powers shifted uncomfortably, their faces pale or unreadable. Some tried to whisper among themselves, hoping to control the damage, while others sat frozen, knowing their secrets had been dragged into the light. one senior delegate stood and demanded that the human delegation cease their presentation, accusing them of violating council protocol and exposing unverified data. But before he could finish, Ambassador Voss turned to him and projected a direct transmission. It was the delegate's own voice, recorded during a private call discussing relocation plans for a species that had since vanished. His words echoed across the hall. He sat down in silence. Other representatives looked to each other with disbelief. The chamber had turned into more than a courtroom. It had become a mirror. One by one, the cracks became visible. Some demanded to know how humanity had gathered such intelligence. How did a species from a single system obtain access to deeply hidden council files, intercept military communications, and reach places others couldn't? Lyra Voss offered no detailed answer, only a simple statement. We paid attention when others chose to look away. That sentence struck deeper than any accusation. It wasn't just about data or technology. It was about the will to listen, to question, and to act. Many in the chamber had grown used to ignoring what was inconvenient. Earth had not. Among the more vulnerable civilizations, those with little influence or forgotten status, a quiet sense of hope began to rise. They had long watched the powerful speak of peace while doing otherwise in secret. Now, for the first time, someone had stood up not for power, but for truth. To them, humanity was not reckless or dangerous. They were protectors, and more than that, they were proof that silence could be broken. As the last testimony faded and the lights dimmed, the chamber remained heavy with silence. No votes were called, no penalties announced. But everything had changed. Conversations outside the hall were filled with disbelief and fear, but also with respect. Even those who had reason to resent Earth found themselves reassessing what they thought they knew. Humans had not come to win favor or declare war. Had simply spoken the truth that too many had hidden. Later that night, anonymous messages were sent to Earth's delegation from smaller species, expressing quiet support and offering cooperation. A few even pledged alliance without treaties, without conditions. They wanted to stand beside those who had dared to speak. And in the dark corners of the galaxy, where similar crimes had yet to be exposed, whispers began to spread. The humans are watching. In one day, humanity had done what entire alliances had failed to do in decades. Not through strength of weapons, but through strength of purpose. They had turned an empty seat into a voice. Had turned suspicion into action. And they had shown the galaxy that even in a hall filled with power, the truth could still rise, loud, clear, and unstoppable. The chamber had never felt so heavy with silence. After Earth's shocking revelations, the Council could no longer hide behind protocol or delay. The evidence was public, the eyes of the galaxy wide open, and the smaller factions long ignored and often silenced had found a voice through. Humanity's courage. What began as quiet support turned into open demands. Species once dismissed as weak now stood tall, their representatives raising their hands, not in fear, but in unity. And so, for the first time in its long and rigid history, the Galactic Council was forced to vote not on trade agreements or border shifts, but on justice. A motion was brought forward to investigate, and where guilt was already proven, to strip certain members of power and suspend their privileges until order and ethics were restored. The ancient powers who had ruled with quiet control now watched, as votes turned against them, one after another. And at the center of it all stood Earth, not demanding thrones or titles, but standing firmly for those who never had the strength to speak. When the final vote passed, many could hardly believe it. Entire factions that had once shaped policy with threats or wealth were removed from influence. Their seats were left empty, not by force, but by accountability. And in the space that opened, Earth was not just welcomed. They were offered a role that no one expected, to lead the development of a new interstellar code. One not based on tradition or ceremony, but built on action, enforcement, and empathy. It was the kind of responsibility that most civilizations feared, because it required constant integrity. Yet Earth accepted without hesitation. Lyra Voss stood again before the council. There was no pride in her expression, only purpose. She looked at the hundreds of species gathered in the great hall and said, in a quiet but unwavering voice, "We're not here to dominate. We're here to make sure the ones with no voice are never ignored again." It wasn't a dramatic speech. It didn't need to be. The meaning was clear, and in the pause that followed, the room understood what had truly changed. This was not just a new chapter. It was a new era. One where rising civilizations could no longer be dismissed, where power was not measured only by fleets or funds, but by the will to stand for what was right. The galaxy, used to slow compromise and hollow debates, had just seen something rare. Conviction backed by courage. In the weeks that followed, Earth worked closely with allies across systems to draft what would be called the Charter of Sentient Rights. It outlined protections for every species, regardless of size, strength, or wealth. It created independent review bodies, equal representation, and strict penalties for violations of life and culture. And most importantly, it gave a place at the table to those who had never been invited before. For many, it felt like waking up from a long silence. Survivors of forgotten wars spoke again. Worlds once hidden behind political shadows emerged into the light. Even former skeptics began to accept that humanity's presence was not temporary, it was necessary. Still, Earth did not claim superiority. Their fleets remained mostly out of sight, their ambassadors respectful. But behind every meeting and every quiet negotiation was a reminder. Humanity listened, and when needed, humanity acted. This earned them not just allies, but something more powerful: trust. In the quiet corners of diplomatic lounges, ancient species whispered to each other that maybe Earth had brought back something the Council had lost long ago: purpose. Not ambition, not legacy. The simple belief that peace was worth protecting, not only with words, but with action. On the final day of the Council's restructuring, a new flag was raised not over conquered land, but in unity. A flag bearing the symbol of the Council reborn, surrounded by a ring of stars, with one bright spark at the center, a blue and green planet called Earth. And though the humans said little about it, the message was clear across the stars. A call for help, a voice unheard, a hidden truth none of these would be ignored again, because someone was watching, someone was listening, and someone would always stand. In that new light, across thousands of worlds, in every language spoken, among the stars, the meaning was felt deeply and clearly: Earth had arrived, and with them came hope.